to a totalitarian regime, because these are avenues that you have to control, otherwise this is where subversive activity takes place. What's fascism? Well, fascism is an ideology. It's what maybe drives a dictator. It's what drives them to want to control everything. Fascism is this idea that the needs of the state are superior to your own individual needs. Your needs are you are there to serve the state. The state is not necessarily there to serve you. You are subservient to the state. It comes from Roman terminology. A fasces is a common kind of iconic image in Rome where there would be a bundle, you chop wood and then you'd put the axe in the center. There'd be a bundle of sticks and an axe at the center. What that bundle of sticks became kind of symbolic of is that there's strength in numbers. That's a simple way of kind of giving you that idea. In the Albany Convention, Ben Franklin was trying to convince the states, the colonies, to unify in a confederacy. And he wanted us to follow the Iroquois model. He brought the chief, Chief Conesago, there to that convention to kind of talk about what a confederacy was and what it would do for the 13 colonies. And what Chief Conesago did is he stood up in front of the convention, he held up a single arrow, and he said, "This is one of your colonies independently," and he snapped it. And then he said, "These are your 13 colonies together," and he held up 13 arrows in a bundle and obviously couldn't snap it from their strength in numbers, right? And if you look at like our dollar bill, you've got an eagle on it, right? And he's got two things in his talons. Anybody know? What's in the talons?
One is an olive branch.
Yeah. And what's in the other? Kind of the other end of the equation. We'll pursue things through peace, but the Chief Conesago, story there was informative in terms of this question. What's in the other?
Narrow.
13 of them. He's got the so we'll peace in one hand, power in the other hand. So again, this is kind of we talk about fascism. Some of our federal system, some of our iconic imagery that we use has a tie into this. It's a matter of degree. We see strength in numbers. We don't see necessarily a kind of a slavish sacrifice of the individual that extremists do when they think about fascism. Fascism was carried to was a movement started again around World War II. You can look at Benito Mussolini and his fascist party. You can look at China under Mao Zedong. Spain, during this time period had a fascist movement where again it goes to an extreme where the needs of the individual are sacrificed to the group. How do I distinguish these terms? Well, an analogy I think is kind of helpful. Think of it like a vehicle. The dictator is the driver. When I think of totalitarianism, that's the vehicle that's going to get that dictator around. And fascism is the fuel. It's what fuels them. It's what drives them. Okay? So they're kind of separate and distinct concepts. Dictatorship is about who's in charge. Totalitarianism is their ruling approach, how they get from point A to point B. Fascism is the belief system that kind of fuels them and is why they're doing what they're doing. And that may be a way to kind of keep those separate and distinct. All right? Quick aside, what's interesting is obviously when you think of dictatorships, you think of them in a negative light, and I think rightly so. But what's interesting is you often find individuals somewhat nostalgic for totalitarian rulers. After the fall of Mussolini, there used to be people that wistfully said, well, at least the trains ran on time. We liked Mussolini. Things were organized. Things were efficient. People, got kind of sent away if they didn't follow things, but at least the trains ran on time. That's literally a quote that you'd hear from people that textbooks often kind of reported on. It's interesting. I think it gets to the very basis of what we want in government, and that's security. And if security is not there, we're willing to sacrifice quite a bit in exchange for it. We don't like instability. And often it becomes a logic trap that we can't think of our way out of. There is no way to get out of it. I mean, I'm willing to give up anything and everything for security. And, you know, that's the end of the equation. We'll see when we look at Locke and Hobbes. Locke figures out a way around that riddle, and we'll come back to that. Okay, what's an oligarchy? An oligarchy is a rule by few. Instead of one individual being in charge, I've got a kind of an elite group. To complicate an oligarchy, what makes them elite can vary. And as it varies, sometimes you get different terminology that pops up. So it could be based on wealth. You could have wealthy individuals that use the wealth to kind of control and manipulate the political system, and therefore they're in charge. It could be based on social rank. You know, if you go back through history, you know, lords and people with titles were the ones in charge, and that technically is an oligarchy. It could be based on religion, and this gets us into one of our first kind of terms. If religious authorities are the ones in charge, anybody know what I have? What's that system of government where religious authorities are in charge? Not a democracy, but that end root is still there. And it's up there. A theocracy. All right, so a theocracy is where religious officials are in charge. You often see, especially in Latin America and in Central and South America, there was a period of time where the people with the weapons were in charge. You had, you know, governments easily overthrown because they didn't have certain stopgap measures between the government and the military. And the military would come in and take over. When that happens, it's called a junta, which is a fun word to say. You're going to go home today just having that, you know, you'll say that all the time, compulsively. Junta. Great word. All right? That's where military officials take power. And if you think about it in our system, my God, you know, we've got nuclear arsenals. We've got major weaponry out there. Why aren't they in charge? Well, in part it's because who's in charge of the military? Who's the highest authority when we look at our military? Who commands them?
Isn't the president?
President. The president is commander-in-chief. Does the president have to have any military qualifications? No. You know, there's only 3 qualifications that the president has to have. Anybody know? Not specifically, but in general. What?
You have to be like a U.S. citizen.
Yep.
Or like born in the U.S.
So you need to be a natural-born citizen, which means either you were born in the United States on U.S. soil, or you were born to your parents were citizens, right? So there's one.
Over 35.
You have to have a certain age requirement, over 35. Can you be from anywhere? I mean, you can have citizenship, but you could be, you know, serving off somewhere in a foreign country, or you could have been, your parents moved, they're expatriates.
Yeah, you have to have been living in the U.S. for the past 12 years.
Yeah, residency, 14. So you have to have had at least 14 years in the United States, and the logic is that builds up loyalty. That I've been here long enough to love the country. Here a year, you might not like it. 14 years. So that allows someone who was maybe born to U.S. parents but has lived abroad, or someone that has been, you know, serving diplomatically or in the military, I'm just going to undo my point here in a second, to be president. You don't have to be in the government. So technically, we put a civilian in charge of our military. And in doing so, we kind of remove the danger of that type of oligarchy, hopefully. All right? All right, democracy. And then we'll take a pause. Demos means rule by many. And there are different types of democracies that hopefully you've come in here with a working knowledge of. You know, we're going to more uniquely, obviously, I'm giving you background information on the things you should know, and that's going to allow us to more narrowly zoom in on just our type of government. We're not, you know, this course is not about a comparative system, but knowing other systems helps you understand your own a little bit better. You know, it's the compare-contrast. You know, how do you describe night if you don't have day? All right. So, what are these 2 types of democracies? In each, obviously, political authority rests with the people, but they take a kind of a different approach. Direct democracy is direct. In other words, the people, the citizens, have an equal voice in making law and public policy. this is the more pure form of democracies. And often it's thought of as better. It's kind of interesting. The more democratic something is, the higher esteem we kind of hold it in. You know, I'll give you an example. Let's say you're making a decision as a class. You know, you get to vote one day on what's for lunch, and it's either going to be, Rowley House of Pizza or Bacon Burger Day. And you're, all right, we're going to vote. And everybody, you watch what happens when we say we're going to vote. Everybody starts to go like this, and they look around. And there's eye contact. And Bacon Burger, right? Bacon. And then you hold your hand up proudly as everybody starts to vote, and you see this ground swelling for Bacon Burger, which is neither bacon nor burger. All the hands go up, and you feel really good about that decision. I was part of the group, and I was part of the consensus, and we overwhelmingly voted for bacon burgers. That's a good decision. It's an interesting concept that basically says the more people that make a decision, the better the decision. 10 people make a decision, that's an okay decision, based on where the majority goes. 1,000 people, that's a better decision. What's missed in this is the Founding Fathers didn't like this, did they? They weren't very keen on direct democracies. They often saw, the average person as part of the mob, riffraff, ill-informed, easily swayed. There was this groundswelling for bacon burgers, and look at you guys like sheep voting for these things, that are neither bacon nor burger. They kind of criticized it. We tend to think of it as the most pure system, but there are flaws to direct democracy. One, it's highly impractical. You only see direct democracies in kind of limited historic and contemporary examples, like Greece, obviously, Athens being the classic example. But there was reason why Athens could be a direct democracy. They were small. Greece was divided up into small islands, and that geography separated them, and it allowed Athens to kind of set up its own unique, self-rule. You see it in New England. New England small towns. We still do things by town meetings. We still make laws and public policy by town meetings. You'll have a town meeting, and whoever is a citizen and registered can come, and you can participate if you're not, for that matter. But when it comes to kind of voting, they'll decide to put certain things on the ballot, like an override, and then it goes to the town to vote on. So we still make a lot of decisions using direct democracy. But it doesn't work for larger populations. Can you imagine, the United States trying to function as a direct democracy? All right, we got to make a decision about, the deficit. Let's get together and have a discussion with, what's the U.S. population? Where am I roughly? Nick knows, based on that correct. Where am I at?
Like 350 million.
Good. Yeah, I'm around 314, 15 million, right? 300. Now, let's cut that down, because I'm not having 5-year-olds come and be part of that conversation. Let's a million. I mean, not a million. Let's 100 million. Let's have 100 million kind of come together, and we're just going to introduce ourselves first, because that's civil. And 40 years pass by the time I kind of make it around as to, hi, who are you, what's your name, where are you from? 40 years pass. Generations are born and generations die. You can't have it, obviously, in the United States. It's impractical. And again, like I said, many people are critical of it because there's this mob rule part of it. But we idealize it. We idealize it because we think more is better in a decision. Some of it stems from its origins in Greece. We hold up Greece to be this classical civilization. Some of it we hold up because of Greek philosophers who challenged us to kind of think about the ideal, challenged us to think about our role in society. Just as a kind of a quick overview, you wouldn't have any really test questions on Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. But if you were a political science major, this is where you'd start. And so I kind of insert them here. I remember in one of my first classes was modern political thought. I was really excited. Oh boy, modern political thought. Modern political thought was not, I thought it was going to be the 60s on. It started with kind of classical thinkers who began to think about the role of government and the role of the individual. It was Locke, it was Hobbes, it was Rousseau. It involved Plato and the Republic. This is foundational stuff if you're ever thinking about being a political science major, international affairs, public policy kind of major, political communications. This is what you look at. And what the three have in common is they challenge you to pursue the idea